Today we're going to be going over part 2 over using canvases in Daz Studio tutorial. This part 2 is on GIMP. There is also another part 2 that is on Photoshop. So if you're using Photoshop or something like Paint Shop Pro or something that's really similar to Photoshop, you may want to check out that video. Before we get started, I wanted to point out something in the thread. If you go to the new user contests and events thread for September and go to where it says intermediate challenge and go down the page, you're going to see under Adobe Photoshop, it's going to say bit depth. If you click on that link, it's not really Photoshop specific really. It's going to go over the difference between 8-bit and 16-bit depth. Now, this is talking about in photos, but the difference is the same no matter what we're talking about. And it kind of breaks down what you get when you're using, say, 16-bit depth versus 8. Granted, the EXRs are actually 32-bit depth. Just know that from 8-bit to 16-bit is better quality. You have more depth of color. And if you go up to 32-bit, it's going to be even better. It may also be worth looking up the term EXR because there'll be some more information there. But I just wanted to point out that there is additional information if you're curious about bit depth, EXRs, all of that good stuff. And so let's go ahead and get started here in GIMP. So I've already got GIMP open. I think I have the latest version. I'm pretty positive. Please note that I am not a GIMP pro. I normally use Photoshop, so I am not as well schooled in GIMP. I have only used it kind of a handful of times. So if I mess up, please forgive me. What I want to do first is kind of do a brief overview of a couple things. So if you're wanting to follow along, don't quite follow along yet. The first thing I want to do is just open up our full scene, our original EXR, and when you open it, what you're going to see is this white mess. The reason is because this is overexposed coming out of Daz Studio. So if we go to colors and we go to exposure, and if we start adjusting this, what you're going to see is that the information is there. It just was really on the bright end of this. Normally, I pick a number someplace right around like -14. So I just kind of type that in. That's about going to look the way it does kind of coming out of Daz Studio. Obviously, you don't have to do it at -14. You can do it at like -13.86, which is a little brighter. You can also do it at like -12. Different people have different numbers that they prefer. I tend to stick right around 14 because to me that looks the closest to what the original, like if I used no canvases with no EXR, it comes close to what the original image looks like for me. Once you do this, before you hit OK and just get out of there, hit the plus sign. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to save a preset. So in this case, we could name it like EXR, EXR Exposure -14. If you have different exposures, like say you want to save one that's -12, you can just do a few of these. That way you can kind of pick and see which ones you like best for what occasion. And now real quick, because I've now made, oh, that's not right. Well, I made a different one. Don't do what I just did there. If for some reason you make a mistake like that, you can go to Manage Saved Presets and do this. But so what it's going to do is it's going to save this for you right in here. So then from now on, when I bring in an EXR and have to convert it, because you'll have to do that with all of them, I can just choose the preset, hit OK, and that's a lot faster than doing it the whole other way. So you'll just come in, exposure, go to your preset that you just made, hit OK, and there you have it. The next thing worth kind of pointing out is that the layer that it makes is basically the name of that EXR file. Obviously, that's kind of a long, crazy name, so you could double click and come in here, and you got to kind of click once and then just drag. And you can rename all of these to whatever you prefer. And I just keep grabbing that F for some reason, which I didn't want to do. Ooh, it's like this thing doesn't like me. My mouse is fighting me. But so you could rename it something like that just to make it easier to see. So it can be worth doing, because if you get a lot of EXR layers, if you layer up the file, you're going to have a lot of layers to deal with, and being able to see the name easier is definitely handy. Let's see here. The next thing worth kind of pointing out before we get started is just how you want to kind of set this up. So I'm just going to open up like that, and we'll say these two layers. We're going to open these up. Oops, I didn't do that the way I wanted. Sorry, hit the wrong layer or hit the wrong thing. I want to go to File, Open as Layers. If you do it that way, then instead of getting 3 individual scenes like I just did, you're going to actually get where they're all in one, which is much better. So you're just going to hit Control click or Shift. So if I go here and do Shift, I can pick all of them. If I do Control, then I can pick random ones like so. But you're just going to press and hit Control and just open whichever ones, or hit Shift and open them all. Then go to Open, and it's going to bring them all into one file. Much better. First thing we're going to do in this file is going to be to do exposure on all the layers that are going to need it. So we would do it to this one. We would do it to this one. We would do it to this one. Right now you don't see much because the other layers are underneath. Now, when we get to here, obviously, like, you can't see what's below here. You can't see what's below here. What you need to do is every layer but your bottom layer, which you need to make sure that your bottom layer is your full scene or your beauty render. But every layer above that, what you're going to do is switch it from normal to addition. And if I do that, you're going to see, now I can see through this layer. If I switch this one to addition, it's going to do the same. So now this is adding some brightness to the hair. This is adding some brightness to the light. But so that's the basic setup, is you're going to have your main layer that's going to be your full scene. And then above that, the other layers. And almost all of them, you're going to switch to addition. There's a couple exceptions, and I will go over that when we get into another file here. But so instead of you watching me rename the layers and set them all to addition and all that, I figured I would just do that with a couple, and then I would make a preset file, which is what I did. So now we're going to open that file. And now is the point where if you want to follow along, you're good to go. So in your case, what you're going to do is most likely go to File, Open as Layers, and just select all of your rendered layers, like so. And then hit Open, and what it's going to do is put them all in a big file like this. It won't have this, though, that I put in there. On these layers, you're going to need to convert all of these layers. So full scene, your G8, your hair, your clothes, diffuse, specular, glossy, emission, any lights, environment lighting. The normal, depth, and material ID, you do not need to do a convert on. So you don't need to do colors exposure on those ones. You're going to leave them as is. Actually, I take that back. Depth, you do have to do an exposure on. But normal and material ID, you do not. Now, as you can see, I have my full scene at the bottom. Then I have these three that were my hair, my skin, and my clothes. These are more selection layers for me. And then I have all the other ones on top. These are all set to addition. These ones are not, and right now they are turned off. These help with certain specific things, but aren't necessarily part of the main composition. So you can shut the eyeballs on these ones off and just have them up here. Now, what we are going to do to start here is we are going to have a small discussion. I'm going to create a layer up here on this diffuse layer. So this is going to be the first one that we're going to kind of discuss what it is, what you can do with it. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to drop that in here. I'm also going to take the specular and put that on top of it. And then the glossy and put that on top of it. And then the emissive and put that on top of it. Now, if I switch this one, which is the diffuse, to normal instead of addition, and I turn this off, what you're going to see is that the two are pretty close. If I move this all the way down here and turn this off and on, the only difference that you're seeing right now is these candle flames, because for whatever reason, when I rendered, they didn't render in my emission render. I'm not sure what I did wrong there. I must have missed a step someplace when I rendered out my emission. So I forgot to grab my I forgot to make sure that the candlelight was part of the selection, I guess. But it does give you an idea, or should give you an idea, of the fact that basically if you combine the diffuse, the specular, the glossy, and the emission together, it's basically giving you this full scene render. So technically, all of these you could skip. Like, you could not render those. Just do the full scene and then do all of these and get you to the same place. That said, having these can give you some benefit. Having basically this full scene layered out, basically, will give you the ability to get at certain things, like, say, the specular, the glossy, or the emission, and change some things that you otherwise couldn't change if you didn't have these layers. Like, there's certain things you couldn't get at, which we will go over, but I just wanted to kind of point out that basically these layers create this layer. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put these all back where they go. 7, 8, we're going to delete this because we don't need it. Okay. So now we're back to the beginning here. The first thing that we're going to play with is going to be this glossy layer. I'm going to bring it up top here for a minute so and put it back to normal so you can see which layer. That would be this layer. Let's try just zooming in a little bit so you can see. So the first thing we're going to play with is going to be this. And we're going to put it back down where I had it, kind of in order, and we're going to put it back to addition. And we're going to discuss what we can do with it. First, just having it on addition above the regular layer, if we turn this off, what you're going to see is it's punching up the glow on everything. So if you look at the grass over here, if you look like in her hair, if you look on her skin, this is actually making it more glossy than the original. So it's adding in more of those colors. What you can do with this is, because only the gloss is on this layer, if I go to like colors and go to, say, we'll say levels for right now. And I bring the brights in. You're going to see that it's making those areas brighter and brighter. Actually, she looks like she's metallic at this point. That's probably a little much. But as you can see, you could really, really punch up the highlights just by doing that. If I grab the mid-tone slider and slide that up, it's going to darken the highlights. If I go back this way, it's going to really brighten them, which actually looks kind of neat. Kind of looks like a winter princess or something. But that gives you an idea of how it's targeting just those specific areas. Same with if I bring this in, it's going to get everything darker and darker. But in this case, we're going to hit cancel. We're going to look at something else you can do. If we go into hue and saturation, I never played with hue chroma. I'm going to peek at that real quick. Okay. If you go into, say, hue and saturation, which is here, say she looks very red to me, or very kind of magenta. I could click on magenta to target that color, and then I could start adjusting the hue and possibly pull some of the magenta out of like her hair and her skin. Now it's not doing much for her skin, but it is in her hair. I don't know if you can see that. I could also try going into the red channel and doing that. Could be that more information is in the red. Looks like it. Should see like back behind on the candles back here and in her hair how it's targeting those colors and pulling that out. So I just changed the candles and her hair kind of green. And if I go to master, so we'll just go to the main channel and now drag around. And here, we're going to move this over here for a minute and drag around. What you're going to see is I can actually change the coloring quite a bit on just the targeted areas. Now, on her skin, it's not as obvious. Hopefully you can see, like right now, there's a little bit of purple because it's only targeting the highlights. So right here, it's kind of a little purple, while the hair is getting a little green, funny enough. If we go this way, it's kind of a little bit more blue. If we go this way as well, it's kind of going into blue and green. But you can see how you can actually adjust kind of like the highlights or the tonal quality of this. In this case, what I might want to do is say go a little bit more towards like, I don't know, say a yellowy orange, and then maybe up the saturation on that. And if you could see, like you can saturate and desaturate as well. So you can pull some of the lighting back out. You can add some of the lighting back in and make it kind of deeper and richer. So if you look here, there's a lot more purpley showing up in the skin tone right now. You can also target specific areas with masking. So if I like this just in the hair, I could duplicate this layer and target just the hair. So like, here, let's do that real quick. To duplicate the layer, I believe it's this button. Yes. Okay. We're going to turn this one off. I'm going to leave that one on. We're going to go back to colors. And we're going to go back to hue and saturation. And we're going to leave it on master. And I'm just going to focus on the hair for right this minute. And we're going to say, I don't want green light. We're going to say I want it to be just a smidge more yellowy than it was. And maybe a little bit more saturation. So I want it to really kind of pop the light on the hair. So I could go like that and hit OK. And then I could right click here and do add layer mask. And in this case, I think we'll keep it as black full transparency and hit OK. And what you're going to see is that just went away. Now, if we get a paintbrush and we paint in white just where the hair is, or just where we want that effect to be, see how it's adding it back in everywhere that I paint right now? What it's doing is we just created a mask and now we're kind of opening this all back up. So if you look here, you should be able to see there's kind of like a white swish going on. That was what I was painting. So that's an easy way to just target that specific area with this glossy layer. So you can just edit that, and you notice the skin color didn't change. If I turn this one back on, you can see how on here, from here to here, the skin was a lot brighter. Everything else was brighter. On this one, it's literally only the hair, because we masked and we told it to basically ignore all the rest. So we told it to black out all the rest of this and just only show what I painted in white. So we'll go ahead, we'll get rid of that. So that kind of goes over the glossy layer and how you can use that. The next one we will take a look at is the specular. Now, the specular pretty much only rendered out the eyes to see how the eyes are brighter. Hopefully you can see that. You could use this if the eye whites were real dark. Sometimes other things will render out on this layer. In this particular scene, pretty much the eyes were all that really showed. But you could use this to make the eye whites a little whiter or a little darker even. So you can, you know, turn this up or turn this down as needed. In this case, though, there's not too much to show you there. So that's about it for that. The next thing worth taking a look at here is going to be the lighting. So light group, these two light groups. So we're going to turn off environment light. We're going to turn off this one. We're just going to focus on this one. If I switch this to normal, you're going to see that this light was a very, very blue light. And we're going to zoom out for this. So you can just hit the magnifier and then press and hold Control and click, and it'll zoom you out, just in case you didn't know. I'll zoom in a little bit more. But okay, so if you look, the lighting is very blue. It's a very, very blue light. With this layer, what I can do, we're going to put it back to Edition now, is I could play with that particular light within the scene. So if I go to Colors and go to Hue Saturation on this layer, and then begin to drag things around, what you're going to notice is I am changing the color tone of the scene from blue into a whole bunch of other colors. It is worth noting that if I target just the blue channel, since this was a blue light, or possibly cyan, we'll see which one the information's in. If I target the blue channel and do it, it's going to do this a little different. And okay, it looks like it wasn't all in the blue channel. That's actually just targeting very specific things in the scene. Let's try, it's either going to be cyan or maybe magenta. We'll try targeting cyan and we'll see what we get here. Okay, not much changing there. So maybe it's in the magenta channel even though it's blue. It was a blue light, but the coloring mix must have been closer to magenta. Yeah, that's changing more of the scene. Okay, so if I click on magenta and kind of do this, you can see how now I can actually manipulate the lighting to be a little bluer. I would not go that crazy with it. We can also go to the master. Here, I'm going to hit cancel and go back in just to focus on master for a minute. If I go to master and kind of very slowly You can see how you can kind of tweak the lighting a little more one way or another. So if I wanted to be a little more blue, I could do that here. If I want to take and add more of the reds back in, I can do that. I can up the lightness, which I don't think I'd want to do. I could bring it down and make the image deeper if I wanted to, adjusting the lightness. I could change the saturation and make it more or less saturated. That would be way too saturated. I could also desaturate with this, like so. Another thing that I could technically do is I could go to colors and do, like, say, curves. And let's see here. I think we'll just pick like an area right in here somewhere and start pulling up and down. So I could brighten that light. I could deepen that light using curves. I believe, yes. I can also target a channel in here and then brighten or darken that specific channel. And if you go one way, so if I go up, I'm going to be adding more blue because I'm in the blue channel. If I go down, I'm going to be adding more of the opposite of blue, which I believe is going to be more yellow. So as I go down, I'm going to add more and more yellow to it and take more and more of the blue away. It's a color wheel opposite thing. I don't have the color wheel in front of me. I'm pretty sure it's yellow. Same with red. If you go up, you're going to be putting red in. If you go down, you're going to be taking red out. So that is a good way to adjust, like if you decide you want to change the color of your light. So maybe you don't like the kind of purpley reddish tint that you got. You can use this to pull some of that away. Like obviously if I up the green here, I just pulled pretty much all of that blue out and actually got it back to about natural color tone, funny enough. If I pull this down the other way, I'm going to add a lot more magenta into it. And so you can see how you can have a lot of power with this one, with this specific, with the light groups. So let's say we wanted to do that, and maybe I want to do a levels and now play with how bright or dark, maybe. I don't know. We'll say we're going to dim it, but leave it the way this way. So now, as you can see, if I shut this off, that was what it originally, what the colors were. This is what it is now. It's a big difference. If I play with this next one, which we're going to go back to normal so you can see it. So this was basically a backlight. So it was a spotlight that was flashing from behind her directly onto her hair and onto the back of her clothes and stuff like that. If I play with this one, I can change that glow. So right now we're to here, which I actually really like that how it is. But anyway, if I come in here and I go to colors, this one I might want to play with, say, the curves and maybe make it stronger. So if I go up, it's going to get really, really strong. If I go down, it's going to kind of tone it back out. In this case, I'm going to go up. I actually really liked how the light was down on here when I made this really strong. Like I liked the strong shadow and the strong light. So I think on the version that I played with, I kind of went this way with it to add more light back in that wasn't there. So we're going to say I'm going to leave that way. And then maybe I might go to hue and saturation. No, I'm actually going to go back to curves and go to red channel and drag down. Now if I drag down, I'm going to start pulling some of that red back out. So I could get like a glow, but I could kind of calm it back. I could really, really pump it up really red. I just wanted to kind of show that you could change the color. I could go into blue and perhaps add a little bit more blue tone into it. I will say, if I go this way, I add a lot of blue in. But you can see that this light is now a lot bluer down here. This is more blue up here. I don't really want to do that though. I just wanted to show what you could do. So we're going to hit cancel. So that is those two light groups and how those can be handy. I highly recommend, if you do nothing else, do like the main beauty scene, possibly these three, which I know we have not gotten to yet. And then do your lights individually. If you do none of the other canvases, those are the ones that I really advise, because you can completely change your image with just those layers in a 2D application during post work. But okay, so we just did the light groups. We'll look at environment light here. So if I turn this one on and go back to normal for a minute, just to show not a lot of detail on this light, because I actually use spotlights to do most of my lighting, and the environment was actually very, very dark and very, very like dimly exposed. But you can take this in, and I can go to colors, and I can go to like curves on this one, and I could make the entire environment brighter. Now, if you look, it's getting pixely because the environment was very dim, and it tends to get pixely when it's dim like that. I could make it darker, so I can make her environment darker. I could also just play with the hue and saturation and the color again, so we could, you know, bring it this way and take out some of the color. Well, change the coloring, basically. We could also make it a little brighter, which that would look awful, or we could make it a little darker, which I would probably tend to go darker more so than lighter. You could go into the blue channel and up the blue a little bit. Maybe, or change, there's not a lot of blues in here. Anyway, probably, I know what I want to do, just not doing it. Okay. This is one of those times where we'll fall under, please forgive me, because I know how to do this in Photoshop, but not in here. Okay. So if you wanted the shadows and stuff to be a little more blue, you could just, you know, kind of take the color and look at that and adjust. I know a lot of people go for slightly blue tinged shadows instead of like really dark black ones. You could also up the saturation on this or lower the saturation on this level. And you're going to see it's mostly hitting the background and not so much her. But so that gives you an idea of what you can do with that layer. If the lighting was brighter, there'd be more we could do with that layer. But sadly, my lighting's a little dim, so that's why it's kind of going like that. The next layers I want to look at are going to be my favorite ones, which are going to be these three. We're going to bring these all the way up to the top. We can figure out what we do with these. Okay, if I press and I'll hold Alt on my keyboard and then click on one of these layers, you're going to notice that it's going to put marching ants around that area. Now, if I go to colors and go to, let's try hue, saturation, chroma, just because I've never played with this. And adjust, see how I am literally only adjusting her skin and nothing else in this image right now. So technically I could make her black and white, I guess, like take all the color kind of out of her, could put a bunch more in. Just trying to see, will this let me color her skin some crazy color? Like if I wanted her to be blue or green or, yeah, it kind of does. Okay. But so you can kind of see how by using this, I can literally target just the skin area. So this is good for if you decide that you want to change the skin tone. So this is going to be more obvious. So we could go like that, and we could pump this up. And maybe we want to make it a little darker, we'll say. And now all of a sudden she's got more purple skin. I could make her a green alien. I don't know what overlap does. If anybody knows what overlap does, please tell me. But basically, having these layers makes it so that you can literally just target that area. Now, in this case, I did the marching ants. I don't actually think in here you would necessarily need to do that. Deselect, select one. Okay. You don't necessarily have to do Alt and click that. But another thing worth knowing is that this is a good way to get a mask on a different layer. So if you need to mask off the skin, the hair, or the clothes, you now have masks. You have selections you can use to mask those areas. If you don't know much about masking, I definitely suggest looking up masking tutorials for GIMP on YouTube. There's a ton of tutorials, and masking is one of those things that is super handy and very, very useful. So highly recommend looking that up if you're not familiar with masking. But in this case, like I said, I don't necessarily think we actually have to mask because we could literally just do our adjustments on these layers. So I could select the clothes layer, go to colors, go to curves, and just literally adjust this layer however I kind of want. Don't know how I want. I can also adjust the color for just the clothes. So if for some reason I would like the clothes to be a different color, we could do that. I would just have to go into channel and pick one of the colors. Like we'll say we're going to go into red, which the only thing's really red here is kind of the general tint and these flowers. So let's see if we go up. Okay, it's all got a red tinge. So, okay, if we go up, it's going to add a lot of red into the outfit. If we go down, it's going to kind of take the red more out of the outfit and make it more muted. I could go to, like, say, the blue channel and add in some blue, or we could take some of the blue away to bring the greens out more, which, since this is more of a natural looking outfit with the leafy, flowery, might look better. Go to the green, and I could make the green more dynamic, so I could make it very green. I could make the whole outfit green, as a matter of fact. I could mute the green more. We'll say I want to maybe do it like that and hit OK. And now if I turn this off and on, you can see it just kind of pop the green up just a little. The same can be said for the hair, and obviously we just went over G8 skin, but if I go to hair and go to colors, and we're going to do curves, and we'll look at red right now. If I pull down, I can pull some of the red out of the hair. If I go up, I can add a ton of red back into the hair. You would never want to take it that far. But you can see how you can pretty easily start adjusting, like I want the hair to pop more, or okay, I think that might be a little much. Maybe I want to pull a little bit out of that. Or maybe I think it's a little too much red. I could combat that with a little blue, maybe. Or I could pull more of the blue out if there's a little too much blue. Same with the green. I could add some green in, which is going to bring it more back towards kind of a brown. or I could take more of the green out, which there wasn't much green in here. If you see, it's all pretty minimal green. But so this is how you can kind of adjust the hair. Now I could add some points. Let's see, maybe want it to be higher there, but then back lower here. We'll say I'm going to do that. But now you can see I kind of adjusted some of the color in the hair. Okay, so that is how the clothes, the hair, and the G8 layers work. So basically, these three, you can pinpoint these specific areas. You can also use these three to mask off other things. So like on this layer, say I don't want it brighter on these twigs and I don't want it brighter on the ground. I just wanted to target the hair. I could right click on this and tell it to add a layer mask. So we'll do that and we'll make the mask bright black and hit add. Now, obviously that just made all of the highlights go away. I could now alt click my hair layer like so. Make sure I grab my white paintbrush, and this is going to snap this right just to the hair for me. So this is a good way to just add something you did to one of the other layers to just one part of the body or one part of the character or one part of the hair. And then if I go select none, now if I turn this on and off, you'll see that now the highlights are just on the hair. They're not here anymore. They're not all across down here. Now in this case, I am going to delete this layer mask because I actually wanted it on the whole area, but you can see as it popped back where it was at. Next thing I want to go over. This map is a little odd, the normal map. There's something I can do with it in Photoshop. I'm not sure if the same thing is actually in GIMP. Let me look here. I do not see it offhand. Sorry. I got really quiet, I know. I meant to look at this before I did this, and I didn't. I forgot to look to see if what I use was in here. I don't see it. Basically, this can be used on some... Oh, there it is, right there. Okay, so we can use it. So if I turn this on, this is a mess. First thing to notice is it's super blurry and kind of strange looking. Has a ton of information in it, ton of color data in it as far as just red and green, but it's mostly like noise. So if for some reason this doesn't seem very sharp or it seems too blurry, and you just want to add a little bit of kind of texture back in, then you can click on this layer, and the first thing we're going to have to do is go to colors probably. And we're going to look for desaturate and hope that, well, hue saturation's right here. So we can just turn down the saturation. I lost a bunch of other information. I don't know why. That was weird. Is there a regular just desaturate? Oh, there's one that's just saturation. Okay, there we go. So you're just going to turn this all the way down till you get to black and white. Hit OK. And then go to filters. And then where was that? Okay, enhance and then high pass. And we probably do not want the contrast that high. you want it to be pretty flat. Not that flat. We're gonna say, like 0.05 maybe. We're gonna leave this pretty low. So like I have it at like 1.3 and hit OK. And then if you change this to like overlay or soft light, what it will do is it will add just a bit of detail back into the image. And it might be so subtle, depending on the settings, that it might even be hard to see here. Maybe I needed to pump the settings up a little higher. I have a kind of a, oh, I can see it a little bit. If you look right in this area, just to make it, and see how it is adding some of the data back in. It's actually making this line somewhat sharper. Funny enough, I probably needed to adjust the settings on the high pass part. Granted, we could set that to soft light and then adjust. That would probably be useful. Now you can see kind of as it does more. But it will, hopefully now you can see how it is adding some of the detail back in. Because this was a low lit image, again, it's kind of more pixely. Also, this normal render, I don't believe has anti-aliasing on it. So it tends to get really, really pixely like that. It might have been better, though, if I wouldn't have picked a low light scene. I picked a low light because I wanted to be able to show all the different things you could do with lights. But so hopefully you can see now that it is adding like more detail into, say, like the skirt here. So if I shut it off and on, see how it's sharpening to a certain degree. But it's a good way just to add some detail back into your image. I don't use this a ton, but it can be useful. Then the next one we'll go over is depth. Now, depth is one of those we're going to zoom back out for. I'm going to hit Alt and nope, wrong, Control. And back out here. Depth is good for if you didn't render with depth of field. So I actually do have depth of field on this. I wasn't thinking about that when I did the image. But if you did not render with depth of field on, then you could actually use this to add depth of field. And we're going to adjust the depth of field using this. Now, what you'll need to do for this is you are going to need to duplicate your base layer. So this full scene layer. And we're going to pull that up on top of the depth layer here right this minute. And actually, you know what we're going to do? We're actually going to move depth way down at the bottom of the stack along with this right above it. Okay, so that's where we have this now. And I think I will rearrange my stuff again just to get everything back where it was, kind of in the order it was in. Okay, so we've got our depth layer now in between two copies of the full scene, basically. What you're going to want to do to use this is first you're going to duplicate that. So we did that. We duplicated this layer here. Then you're going to right click on that layer and you're going to select Add Alpha Channel. So that is the first step. Next, you're going to click on the depth layer and go to Edit and Copy. Then you are going to right click on the duplicate of your full scene layer again, and you're going to go to add layer mask and make sure that you have black selected here and hit add. And then you're going to click on that mask. So if it's clicked here, make sure you're clicked there, and you're going to do Control V for paste. And then you're going to click this little anchor, this little green anchor down here at the bottom. And what you have just done is you've now added this depth map to a mask on your full scene. Now the reason, and now you can shut this off. Now the reason we did this is, and here, we'll just move this back up here out of our way again, is now we can use this mask to control what this shows. So I am going to go and I'm going to click on the layer, not the mask. This is the mask, this is the layer. I'm going to click on the layer. I'm going to go to filters. I'm going to go to blur, and I'm going to go to Gaussian blur. And we're going to turn this just a ridiculous amount of the way up. Really ridiculous amount of the way up. And we're going to hit OK. Now, if you look here, notice it doesn't look, the thumbnail does not look like this anymore. And I will try to make that bigger here real quick. Enormous. Okay. So if you look, I definitely added a ton of blur, way too much blur actually. But oddly, if you look at the scene, it doesn't much look like I added anything. That is because this mask is controlling how much of this blur you see. So now if I click on the mask and I go to colors and I go to either levels or curves, we'll do levels. And let's see, where can I put this? Put this over here. If I start adjusting these sliders, it's going to make the depth of the blacks and the whites in this image stronger. So as I pull this end in, and this end in, this image is so blurry already, I don't know if it's really going to show real well or not. And I don't know if it's actually previewing. Oh, it's supposed to be. Hold on one second. Let me zoom in a little bit because this is going to be one of those things, because it's already blurry. It's going to be hard to see if it's doing anything. Okay. So let's do this again. Colors. Go to levels. Whoops. Be better if I clicked on that. Come on. If I pull these in and move them around, it will add more blur into the scene or less. Problem is the scene is so blurry already, it is hard to see that it's doing it. Let me see if I'm adjusting the right layer. Yes, I am. Why isn't it showing? Oh, I know why. Ha! I had the diffuse layer on. You didn't. I would have to have these layers over this one. Sorry about that. But so let's go backwards, since you couldn't see what I was doing at all. Okay. Turn that back off and quit being silly. Okay, so if I zoom back out of here again, zooming out should work. We'll just zoom in a little tiny bit and have it about here. Okay, so at this point, if I turn this off and on, There's maybe a tiny tinge difference, but you really can't see much. The power of this is in adjusting the darkness and the brightness of this mask. So now, if we try this one more time and go to levels and start bringing up the darks, that is going to make crisper the areas that are black. So the areas on the forefront are not going to get blurred. Areas that are white towards the background are going to get blurred. So as I up, right now, if you can see, this area is pretty light gray, but it's not really white. As I pull this closer in and in and in, it's going to make that whiter and whiter, which is going to add more and more blur into that back. So if I wanted that to look really foggy in the background, as you can see, I can do that. So I just like added a bunch of fog in. I can then adjust this middle to add it more forward or to pull it back more so that it's kind of only in the back. And if, you know, could pick some place in between here, let's see, we'll say like that and hit OK. Now you can see it adjusted this mask. Now she is not all blurry. These candles up front here and the grass up front here is not all blurry. But as you get further and further back, you're getting more and more blur. So if I turn this on and off, you can see that it did actually add like quite a bit of kind of foggy blur in there. I didn't have to do that this strong, and I didn't have to blur this that much. I really over blurred to make sure you could see it. But so that should give you an idea of how to apply, how to adjust, and how to use this mask. So basically you can use that depth render as a mask to adjust something by depth. So technically you could use it to only target specific like specific areas to change their color too. So if I go back out of all this and let's say I click on this and I go to colors and let's see, let's do saturation. And turn the saturation all the way down. So now this layer is black and white. And then adjust this. Levels. As I adjust this, I'm going to turn the stuff in the background more and more black and white, and the stuff in the foreground is going to stay color, in theory. Oh, I backed out of all that stuff. You know, me and this diffuse layer are not going to get along. But okay. So, at some point, I'm going to stop messing that up. Okay, but so if I go back to levels now, and when I start pulling this up, and more specifically start pulling this back, what you're going to see is the background is going to start getting more and more black and white. And if I maneuver this some more, I can fade that forward. Now, if you look, I just changed most of the scene to black and white, but her clothes, her hair, and kind of the candles as an example. So you could use that to kind of mute or calm, say, the background of the image. I could then say adjust the opacity of this. Maybe I just didn't want that to be quite as saturated as I had it. So I could use this to pull the saturation back out again. So that gives you an idea of what you can do with the depth channel here. Last but not least is going to be this material ID. Now the material ID is good for something called color selections. So if I go to select by color, and click on a color, we'll say this. You see how this just selected this bush. Now what I can do with that is I have now targeted just that within the scene. So I could go to, like, say, the full scene. And if you're going to do something like this, I definitely suggest duplicating it so you're on its own layer, kind of, just in case you don't like it. And then I could go to tools, not tools, colors, and I could go to, like, curves, and I could make just this bush brighter. I could make it darker to blend into the background better. I could adjust just the color of this piece to make it more green, less green. We're going to say I wanted to kind of mute it more, and then select none and get rid of that. So this was before, this was after. So it gave it a little more depth, a little more shadow, and I took some of the color out of it. So that's basically what you can do with this, is you can use this as a way to get at certain areas that maybe you wouldn't normally be able to, and you might want to. So if I thought I might want to adjust these flowers or the colors on the candle, or I might want to adjust the candle flames in here, whatever you color a different color, you can use select by color and click on that and get just that area or just that color thing. So like this was all my little leaves on the ground. I could click on that. We'll go back to here. We'll shut this off. And I could maybe do like tools, colors. I keep going to tools by accident. Use saturation. Let's see here. I could make the leaves that were on the ground a little brighter or a little more green. Darken them up a tiny tinge, maybe. I really went out the saturation. I think I'll lower the saturation. Hit OK. Select none. But so now I just adjusted those as well. So they were yellow, now they're green. Give you an idea. So after playing with all of these things, let's see here. I can just grab and throw in here everything we did. Oops. No, get in there. Specular. Close. Hair. Oh, hey, get in there. Hair. This. And this. Okay, so this was where we started from. So this was originally our image. This is just our full scene. And this is after playing with all the adjustments. So hopefully that gives you a decent idea, I hope, of how to use the stuff within GIMP. I am very sorry for some of the flubs. Like I said, I just don't use this enough to be real familiar with it, where everything is, and I don't normally play around a ton in here. But hopefully that gives you an idea of where everything is at that you might need to use, how you can use the different layers. Hopefully it gives you an idea of what the layers are useful for when you're in your 2D application, which should help you when deciding what you might want to do a canvas of within Dust Studio. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I do know a couple people that use GIMP, like normally use GIMP. So if you run into a problem, please let me know and I can go chase one of them down and have them come and help. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please check out some of these other videos that we recommend. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. Bye!